The year was 1960, the height of the Cold War. The CIA's Technical Services Division, the same people who would later give James Bond his gadgets, had a problem. Soviet diplomats in Washington were meeting in parks, on benches, having conversations American intelligence desperately needed to hear. Traditional bugs didn't work. The Soviets swept for them constantly. Human agents couldn't get close without being spotted. Directional microphones picked up too much background noise. So the CIA did what any rational intelligence agency would do when faced with an impossible surveillance problem. They decided to turn a cat into a spy. Not just any cat. A specially modified, surgically altered, battery-powered feline listening device. Cost to the American taxpayer $20 million in today's money. 5 years of research. The best engineers, surgeons, and animal trainers the CIA could find. They called it Operation Acoustic Kitty. It lasted exactly 1 hour. This is the story of one of the most ambitious, bizarre, and ultimately catastrophic covert operations in CIA history. An operation so absurd that for decades even veteran intelligence officers thought it was a myth, until the documents were declassified. Washington, 1960. Soviet diplomats operated under constant surveillance. The FBI followed them, the CIA watched them. Every phone was tapped, every meeting room was bugged. But the Soviets knew this. They weren't stupid. So they developed countermeasures. Sweep teams checked rooms daily for listening devices. Sensitive conversations happened outdoors, in parks, on street corners, walking through crowded areas where directional microphones couldn't isolate voices. The CIA was going blind. Some of the most critical intelligence, the casual conversations where real information slipped out, was happening in places American technology couldn't reach. The Technical Services Division was desperate for a solution. Someone, history doesn't record who, had an idea. An idea so crazy it should have been laughed out of the room. What if we used an animal? Not a dog. Dogs were too obvious, too trainable, too likely to draw attention. Birds were too unpredictable. But a cat? A stray cat wandering through a park was invisible. Nobody paid attention to cats. They could get within feet of a conversation without anyone noticing. And in 1960, the CIA's engineers believed they could miniaturize electronics enough to turn that cat into a mobile listening device. The concept was simple, in theory. Implant a microphone in the cat's ear canal. Run a wire along its spine to a transmitter in its skull. Power it with a battery in the cat's chest. Train the cat to walk near targets and sit still while transmitting audio back to CIA receivers nearby. Simple, right? One veterinarian raised his hand. Cats don't follow commands. The response from management? Make it work. 5 years and $20 million. What followed was one of the most elaborate and expensive animal modification projects in intelligence history. Surgeons implanted a microphone the size of a pencil eraser in the cat's external ear canal. A thin wire, thinner than a human hair, was threaded along the cat's spine, carefully avoiding nerves and major blood vessels. The transmitter, no larger than a fingernail, was placed at the base of the skull. The battery was the biggest challenge. They needed something powerful enough to transmit for hours, but small enough to fit inside a cat without killing it. After 3 years of development, they created a lithium battery that could be surgically implanted in the cat's chest cavity. Cost overruns became routine. What started as a 1-year project stretched to 5. Estimated budget of a few $100,000 ballooned past $10 million. Adjusted for inflation, over $20 million in today's dollars. For a cat. But the engineers insisted it would work. The technology functioned. The cat survived surgery. Audio quality was surprisingly good, clear enough to pick up conversations from 15 feet away. There was just one problem. The cat didn't cooperate. Cats, as it turns out, don't take orders. The CIA brought in the best animal trainers in the country. People who'd train dogs for the military, dolphins for the Navy, even pigeons for behavioral experiments. None of them could train the cat to do anything useful. Walk toward that bench. The cat would sit down and lick itself. Approach those two men talking. The cat would wander off to investigate a bush. Stay in position and transmit audio. The cat would get bored and leave after 30 seconds. They tried food rewards. The cat ignored them once it was full. They tried punishment. The cat became terrified and wouldn't move at all. They tried conditioning. The cat learned to associate the training sessions with something unpleasant and started hiding. One trainer quit, saying, "You're trying to command an animal that was literally domesticated by deciding to live near humans on its own terms." Cats don't work for anyone. The CIA didn't listen. They'd invested too much to quit now. After 18 months of training, they decided the cat was ready enough. The target was perfect. Two Soviet intelligence officers confirmed KGB meeting on a park bench in Washington, D.C. They'd been observed meeting there multiple times. The FBI had tried directional microphones but couldn't filter out traffic noise and other conversations. This was Operation Acoustic Kitty's moment. The plan was simple. Release the cat near the park. Let it wander naturally toward the bench. Once within range, the cat would, hopefully, sit or lie down near the targets. CIA operatives in a van a block away would receive the transmission. Record everything. Extract intelligence that could change the course of the Cold War. What could possibly go wrong? The day was sunny, perfect weather. The Soviet officers were already at the bench, talking animatedly. This was it. A CIA operative opened a pet carrier at the park entrance. The $20 million cat, now officially designated Asset K9, ironic considering, stepped out. For a moment, everything went according to plan. The cat looked around, oriented itself, started walking, not toward the bench, but in the general direction. CIA operatives held their breath. Audio technicians in the van adjusted their receivers. This was actually working. The cat walked slowly, casually, exactly like a normal cat. Nobody paid it any attention. It was invisible. Perfect tradecraft. 10 feet from the bench, then 8, then 6. The audio was coming through, faint but clear. Russian voices. The technicians started recording, and then the cat stopped. It sat down, right there, 6 feet from the Soviet officers, and began grooming itself. For 45 minutes. The CIA operatives couldn't believe their luck. The cat was in perfect position, transmitting everything. The KGB officers had no idea they were being recorded by a feline cyborg 6 feet away. Intelligence flowed in. Conversations about operations, personnel, techniques. It wasn't world-changing intelligence, but it was real. It was working. The engineers were already planning the next operation, the next cat, maybe a whole fleet of them. And then, a catastrophe in 4 paws decided it had somewhere else to be. The cat stood up, stretched, and without warning, walked directly into the street. CIA operatives shouted, silently, trying not to blow their cover. One started to run toward the cat, then stopped. Too obvious, too suspicious. The cat reached the center lane. A taxi was coming. The driver never saw it. The taxi didn't even slow down. The cat died instantly. $20 million, 5 years of research, the CIA's most ambitious animal surveillance program, ended by a taxi on a Tuesday afternoon. Total operational time, 1 hour and 3 minutes. The CIA had a problem. Not just a dead cat with experimental electronics inside it, lying in the middle of a Washington, D.C. street. They couldn't leave it. If someone found it, a veterinarian, a curious citizen, a Soviet agent, the whole operation would be exposed. The technology could be reverse engineered. The program would become an intelligence disaster and a public relations nightmare. A CIA team was dispatched. They posed as animal control, retrieved the body before anyone examined it too closely. The whole thing was classified above top secret. The official report was buried so deep that for decades, even senior CIA officers thought Operation Acoustic Kitty was an urban legend, a joke, something that couldn't possibly be real. But it was real. Every absurd dollar of it. You'd think this would end animal espionage programs. It didn't. The CIA continued experimenting with animal surveillance through the 1960s and 70s. Birds with cameras, dolphins with sonar monitoring equipment, even insects with miniature transmitters. Most failed. Some worked, barely. None justified the enormous costs. The problem was always the same. You can't command an animal that doesn't want to be commanded. You can train a dog to retrieve. You can train a pigeon to return home. But you can't train any animal to conduct sophisticated espionage against humans who are actively trying to avoid surveillance. Biology didn't cooperate with Cold War spy fantasies. In 2001, under Freedom of Information Act requests, the CIA finally released some Acoustic Kitty documents. Not many, just enough to confirm the program existed. Reaction ranged from laughter to horror. $20 million on a cat. Congressional oversight committees demanded answers. How was this approved? Who thought this was a good idea? Were there more programs like this that taxpayers didn't know about? The CIA's response was essentially, it was the Cold War. We tried everything. And they had. Project Acoustic Kitty was just one of hundreds of bizarre, ambitious, ultimately doomed experimental programs from an era when intelligence agencies had blank checks and permission to try anything that might give America an advantage over the Soviets. Ironically, the concept wasn't entirely wrong. Today's surveillance technology uses the same principles Acoustic Kitty tried to employ. Small, mobile, inconspicuous devices that can get close to targets without raising suspicion. We call them drones now. They work better than cats. The miniaturization technology developed for Acoustic Kitty, the tiny transmitters, the power-efficient batteries, eventually found its way into legitimate intelligence tools. The surgeons who learned to implant electronics in animals helped advance medical technology. So in a roundabout, incredibly expensive way, the program contributed something to human knowledge, just not intelligence gathering. To understand why the CIA spent $20 million on a cat, you have to understand the paranoia of the Cold War era. This was an existential competition. The CIA genuinely believed the Soviets might develop a technological or intelligence advantage that could tip the balance of power permanently. They couldn't afford to leave any stone unturned, no matter how absurd. During the same years as Acoustic Kitty, the CIA was also trying to assassinate Fidel Castro with exploding cigars, developing invisible inks that actually worked, testing LSD on unwitting subjects to see if it could be used for mind control, training dolphins to plant mines on enemy ships. Acoustic Kitty wasn't an outlier. It was typical. Cats weren't the only animals recruited. Project Pigeon, World War II, pigeons trained to guide missiles by pecking at target images. Sounds insane. Actually worked in tests. Never deployed because radar was developed. Marine Mammal Program, 1960s to present. Navy trains dolphins and sea lions to detect mines and enemy divers. Still operational. Actually effective. Insect cyborgs, 2000s. DARPA experimented with implanting electronics in beetles during metamorphosis. Created controllable insects. Creepy, but technically successful. The difference? Those animals had natural behaviors compatible with intelligence tasks. Pigeons fly toward things. Dolphins echolocate underwater. Beetles fly where electromagnetic signals direct them. Cats do whatever the hell they want. Here's the kicker. The Soviets probably knew about Acoustic Kitty. Not the details, but they knew the Americans were trying animal surveillance. KGB officers were trained to be suspicious of animals acting unusually near sensitive conversations. One declassified Soviet intelligence manual from the 1970s includes a section on biological surveillance devices. It advises officers to be wary of animals that approach too closely or linger too long near sensitive discussions. Did they know about the specific cat? Probably not. Did they think the Americans were crazy enough to try it? Absolutely. And they were right. $20 million in today's money. For comparison, that would fund 50 years of traditional human intelligence operations. An entire satellite reconnaissance mission. Hundreds of conventional listening devices. The annual salary of 400 CIA case officers. Instead, it funded one cat for 1 hour. The CIA's official internal review, declassified decades later, concluded, "The work done on this problem over the years reflects a great deal of skill and patience. However, the environmental and security factors in using this technique in a real foreign situation force us to conclude that, for our purposes, it would not be practical." Translation: we spent 5 years proving cats don't make good spies. Could have told you that for free. Today, the CIA doesn't talk about Operation Acoustic Kitty, except as a cautionary tale about Cold War excess. It's taught in intelligence training as an example of how even the smartest people can pursue objectively stupid ideas when fear and unlimited budgets collide. The cat, whose real name, if it had one, remains classified, became the unwitting symbol of intelligence hubris. A reminder that some problems can't be solved with technology, no matter how much money you throw at them. Somewhere in CIA archives, buried in a filing cabinet that will stay classified for another 50 years, there's probably a photo of that cat. The most expensive, least effective, and definitely shortest-serving agent in American intelligence history. Operation Acoustic Kitty lasted 1 hour. The embarrassment lasted forever. And somewhere, in whatever afterlife exists for government-funded cyborg cats, that feline is probably thinking, "I told you I didn't want to do this." This was the story of Operation Acoustic Kitty. $20 million, 5 years of work, and one very confused cat. Sometimes, the most classified operations aren't kept secret because they work too well. They're kept secret because they failed too spectacularly.